with something new, as I've seen hardly anyone talk about this show. Or, well, it's probably because my For You page is kind of wonky, but it could also be for one or two reasons. One, Amazon's marketing for some reason did little to no promoting, though with how lacking the promoting was for Vox Machina season 2 and 3, I'm not that surprised. But I'm also not happy about it. And two, D&D based shows aren't getting the time they deserve, causing a lack of interest for the regular viewer. And I'm going to elaborate on that because this is more of like a regular viewer thing than like actual D&D fans, because the community is quite large. But before I get into all of that, as I'm sure a lot of y'all have no idea what I'm even talking about, or this show for that matter. So the Mighty Nein is the second campaign from Critical Role, which is a D&D actual play series run by a lot of very talented and very funny people, aka voice actors. Their first campaign aired on Twitch March 12th, 2015, where we followed the legendary heroes Vox Machina. The series ran till October 12th, 2017, with 115 episodes and was officially picked up by Amazon and aired in January 2022. And the extra fun part of the whole being picked up was that everyone in the original playthrough series would reprise their roles for the show. Also, the reason I'm not talking about that series specifically is mainly because I genuinely liked what we got and didn't have much issue with what was cut and like rearranged. However, the Mighty Nein, aka possibly the most fan favorite campaign, and hands down also kind of my most favorite campaign, was just really fast paced, slightly messy, and kind of like a weird disappointment. Not like a full I'm disappointed, parent monologue situation, but more just like I'm on the verge of being disappointed, And like, don't get me wrong, the animation is great. It clearly got better, and the soundtrack and voice acting is top tier as usual. But the cutting of scenes and like a lot of the rearranging that had to happen was really felt this time around, which leads into my point that D&D styled shows or movies need to be longer, because the Mighty Nein campaign ended up being longer than the original Vox Machina series with 141 episodes and was divided into 6 story arcs: Come Together, The Bad Guys, The Bright Queen's Favor, Swords and Angels, Family Ties, and part 6, Weird Magic. And that is not including the sub arcs that go on in between all of these story arcs. So it's a lot. It's a lot of layers. And the fact that Amazon again gave a show like the Mighty Nein 8 episodes is insane to me when you see how many episodes each arc had and how long it all is. Like, each episode is roughly 4 hours long. Granted, 2 hours of it is silliness and gameplay, but story-wise, it's a lot. And granted, I have zero idea how many seasons they're going to be doing, as Vox Machina's 4th season is on its way. But with the lack of promotion for the connected series, I have a feeling Amazon is trying to silently scrap it because of the overall lack of interest in regular viewers who have no idea what Critical Role is, or have played or know much about D&D as a whole, because all a regular viewer sees is a fantasy show, which can sometimes pique interest. Looking at you, Dragon Prince, even though you really drop the ball in some spots. But the thing about D&D is most of the time world building is more so cliff notes and what can and can't be done. I mean, there are books to use from and build off of, but most of the time the story arc is what's most important, and the world building is more just a backdrop. Depending on who your DM is, everyone's a bit different. My DM is more backdrop heavy. Meanwhile, I'm the one trying to add world building obstacles that isn't monster based. But anyway, yeah, the average viewer isn't going to get all that much if the show they're watching just expects you to understand how the world works and doesn't often question it. And unfortunately, unlike Vox Machina, where it's pretty simple to understand the world building, the Mighty Nein, not as simple to understand. I mean, yes, we do get different locations here and there in the show and in the campaign, so it's not like they're ignoring the world around them. It's just like, it's really hard to explain D&D world building because most of it like is just cliff notes from the books, the occasional like lore dump here and there, and then you have to build off of it because the whole point of the game is like you creating this story. You are creating the story as you play the game. Half the time world building is not included, but in the show itself there is world building happening. boring, but it's so fast paced. Like, you don't get to sit there long enough in the show to enjoy it much. And again, I blame that more on the amount of episodes and scene cutting, because in the actual stream, you get like so much more than the show gives you. Plus, this campaign is very mystery coded, and a good mystery needs time, especially when it's got a lot of layers. And boy, does the Mighty Nein campaign have layers. Also, I want to point out that since the campaign was adapted into a show, there's a lot of new stuff added in, mainly to give a more natural feel than everyone spawning in the same room and going from there like most campaigns do. However, though, it is slightly important that all the characters spawn in at the same time, because none of them are supposed to trust each other. Even we, the audience, isn't really supposed to trust any of them. So in the show, that kind of like goes out the window, because we get bits and pieces of like their character and personality and little bits of their backstory before any of them even meet each other. But like, again, I can agree that some stuff does need to be added and cut, but just, this is like my Homestuck rant all over again, because taking a piece of media that is mainly meant to be listened to or played for multiple hours or months at a time or even years at a time and making it into an 8-episode series is crazy work. Granted, the episodes are a bit longer, running from 45 to 50 minutes, but for some reason, and you'll see what I mean as we review the episodes, because when they end one episode and go to the next one, it genuinely feels like so much more shit happened in the realm of darkness before the next episode, because it doesn't necessarily pick up where we left off. It feels like so much was like chopped. It's such a weird, and now we're back, kind of introduction to the next episode. It's so weird. I'm gonna point it out, you'll see. So let's get to that. So the episode starts off with the stealing of the Luxon beacon, a wondrous item type, which I really wish had been saved for later, as that part of the story doesn't kick in until episode 13 in the original playthrough. But I guess it makes sense since they're kind of solidifying the timeline, since technically everyone meets at the tavern first and comes together, minus a few members who we meet along the way, then leads into the team falling into the inner brewing of the war. But I get it, the theft of the beacon is the main storyline in the original, and also a nice way to introduce Bo and Caleb in a more story-driven way, because in the beginning, we don't know anything about them. Anyway, it'll come back up a lot, but the beacon is important to the Kirin, as it has the ability to, in a sense, put a soul into a new body. And you can see, like, the ritual that they're doing right here, but the Kirin base their whole kingdom around it, so taking it is an act of war. Anyway, we see the thieves infiltrate, I'm assuming the palace. They manage to grab the beacon and take off, and they get past the barrier of the Kirin kingdom and manage to make it to an outpost. However, though, the thieves realize they've fallen into a trap and get attacked, only for a blast to break out. And you can see the blast was pretty big, as it left white markings, which we'll get back to later. But we don't stay on that for too long, as we get into meeting one of the main characters, Caleb, who is being roughed up for basically being homeless. He manages to scare them off with a poop attack, which I find really funny, because in the original playthrough, Jester, another main character, mentions that Caleb should take a shower because he stinks so bad she can smell it at the other table when they're in the original tavern. So him being covered in poo is a nice touch to that callback. Anyway, we move on to Caleb trying to break into a magic shop, but failing as a dog barks and he runs off. We see that a little someone has stolen his stuff in the scuffle of him running away. How, though, is beyond me, but that's D&D Thieves for you. We get a quick chase scene, and we see that this little someone is a goblin, which in the show tries to make it seem like goblins are like these awful creatures. It just gets overlooked a lot, mainly because Nott, yeah, her name is Nott, is covered up and wears a doll's mask to hide her face. So of course not many people are gonna like take notice or show their hate towards goblins, but with this new animation style, she doesn't look as goblinly as she could. She looks too humanoidy. She does not give goblin vibes to me, other than like the eye color, obviously. But anyway, Caleb is able to get his stuff back from her, as he begs for it and says that the stuff isn't junk to him when she calls it junk, and he walks off. Nott follows him and tells him he'll get caught if he tries to break into the magic shop again, and offers to help Caleb if he buys her more alcohol, as it's harder to buy due to being a goblin. Caleb agrees, and they break into the shop after doing their first ever distract plan, which in the original playthrough, they have many that they can like roster through, but since this is the first one, Caleb just gets hit in the nuts. Nott does manage to break in and get Caleb inside, and as Caleb is getting bat poop, it always leads back to poop with Caleb, we see Nott sees Caleb's wanted poster, which I don't think is a part of the original playthrough, since they were already pretty good friends when it originally started, but I do like that Nott like contemplates on killing killing Caleb and getting the rewards, but stops short of killing Caleb after seeing what he needed the poop for, which was to resurrect his dead cat. But it seems the spell didn't work or didn't last as long as Frumpkin fades out, which I am very curious how they're going to do Frumpkin, as the original Frumpkin is actually a fae creature who takes on the form of Caleb's OG cat, but the show kind of implies that this is OG Frumpkin, so I'm not too sure on this. Anyway though, Nott gets really into Caleb's ability in doing magic and wants to know if he can do more, but he states he lost his abilities and that he now needs good material to do better spells. Nott offers to help him with her skill of stealing for him, and Caleb is surprised by this offer to help, but is genuinely appreciates it and agrees to her help, along with also agreeing to help her keep her flask full. He mentions he wants to go to a carnival that has something that he wants, and they finally exchange names. Caleb Widowgast and Nott the Brave, no comma. And then we get a quick, who took your magic and did you kill them? Not yet move to the next scene to show who it was, still alive scene. I always really enjoy those, but that part of their introduction is over, which I should say, before they actually break into the magic shop, we actually move over to a new location, the magic school of the Empire, to get introduced to Trent, the archmage for the king, and how sadistic he truly is as he turns off the pain receptors of a living subject and slices him open, only to wait till everyone leaves the classroom and turning it back on to watch the person scream after being told the king wishes to see him. So you can kind of see why I skipped over that part to just explain all of Caleb and Nott the Brave's thing. Anyway, the meeting is simple. Everyone is nervous about the possibility of a war with the Kirin, as the queen has given them 2 days to return the beacon, which they believe they do not have. Trent mentions that they have always been at odds with the Kirin, and that the queen only needed to wait and use this loss of the beacon as a way to start a war, which Trent says that the kingdom will follow the king, as they will make them terrified of what will happen if they don't, which I find to be really messed up logic, but okay. And the king agrees to war, and we move over to Trent and another council member speak about how she subtly knows he's the one who took the beacon, and that Cobalt Soul members are going to investigate the area, and asks if they'll find anything, and Trent says he doubts it, which sure, pal, that's what they all say, because we do in fact cut right over to the Cobalt Soul members investigating the explosion. And this is where we meet Bo, who is exploring the scene and comes to a much smarter and accurate conclusion on what happened versus the older member she's with, who's making up stuff as he looks around. Bo does take notice that the decomposition on some of the bodies only happened in the lines the blast made, mentioning it's like time sped up, which will come back into play later, much later. But she gets irritated with her superior and lashes out at his inability to do his job. We then learn she's still training to be a full member and also training to be an expositor, which she is really good at. And I kind of like this more, as in the playthrough she was already a full member, which is semi-normal for a lot of D&D characters to be something instead of in their training phases. Plus it adds to the new story arc of her moving the plot along, because originally, like I said before, nothing really kickstarts until episode 13, where they just stumble in to what's been going on. So her already being semi-involved right now is a good way to progress the story, with her helping it move along, if that makes sense. Anyway, Bo does find something from the blast and takes it back, but before she can give it to her steward, she's reprimanded for talking down to her superior, as she was only there to learn and observe, and that the report her superior gave to the head seems legit. But he does ask her what she thinks happened. She states it wasn't just a simple attack for war, but a trap made by the Kryn to stop thieves, as whatever they had to be important enough to take out a whole outpost. She does guess correct that it's a weapon, which I find really funny. That's where her first thought goes. I mean, with so many magical artifacts, you'd think she'd assume it was something important enough to the Kryn, but I guess with the constant fighting between the Kryn and the Empire, it makes some sense to think weapon first. Anyway, she mentions someone must still have it, as it wasn't there, and that she found a shard that amplifies magic, so someone must have gotten away and probably was the one who cast the spell. Her steward takes the stone and reprimands her for not turning in evidence, and says she's clearly not ready and that her ego is unbecoming of a Cobalt Soul monk, which if you watch the entire show and playthrough, yeah, Bo is a little unconventional when it comes to a monk character, but this specific brand of monk that Bo is more like investigation / mediators, as they work outside of the Empire, or so Bo thinks. But she excuses herself and then secretly follows her steward to a hidden workroom where the green shard she found is being mass-produced and shipped out. She overhears that her steward and many other top-ranked monks are in the pockets of the Empire and returns the shard to Trent's second-in-command, who asks if Bo was taken care of. Bo's steward assures her things have been taken care of, and Trent's second-in-command tells him good and to go back and wait for more commands. And as he leaves, Trent's second then dips out the window and Bo follows her, which, Bo, way to not recognize a reverse cat and mouse chase. However, though, we do get the best one-on-one fight scene. Like, the animation is on full blast right here. Plus, the magic Trent second uses is so cool. I'm a sucker for flash stepping. Anyway, Bo gets backed into a ruin trap and gets gassed and passes out. When she wakes back up, she's recovering in Dairon's home, but it's revealed she's also a cobalt soul and a spy as well. We also learn Bo went up against a Volstrucker, which is what Trent's second-in-command is, which are wizard assassins who operate in secret, and that the stuff being shipped off is called residual, and that Dairon is aware of the traders in the Cobalt Soul. Bo has a hard time believing this, but bro, you just saw your steward give over evidence and ask for more money when the Volstruckers have them clean up their mess. But I get it, he brought her in and made her feel that she could do more and do something that mattered, but with everything now on the light, it all just feels like bull. Dairon says that's not necessarily true, as war is coming, and normally the Cobalt Soul would intervene with peace, but because they can't be trusted anymore, finding the weapon is up to them. Bo disagrees to be involved as she's just a trainee, and now knows that the organization is all bull, and that she's nothing. Dairon agrees that no one believes in or cares about her, not even her father, and that she is a nobody, and that's what makes her dangerous, as no one will see her coming, which is a smart tactic, but also kind of dumb when we learn later what we learned later. Anyway, that's where Bo's introduction cuts off, as the last part of the episode goes back to Trent and the other Volstruckers who stole the beacon. We see that the third member of their party is half dead and pretty much just struggling to stay alive. Trent asks what happened and Mercy kills the man, and we see that it was his shard that Bo found. We also learn someone hit the beacon with a spell, which is why it did what it did, but how the other two got out alive with no damages is beyond me. But we see after the boy dies, the beacon glows awake and absorbs the boy's soul into it. And we see Trent get real excited by this, and the episode ends. Quick little review here before we move on. I do want to say I do like this episode a lot, and I do like the rework of how the characters operate separately and how the start of their arcs will play out now that the main story is in full gear. Also, I don't know. I still kind of prefer learning about the characters the same time the other characters do. Like, I get that everything has to be set up for the major story. I do get that. But again, so much of the original playthrough is about distrust, even amongst the players themselves, which granted, we get that a bit from Caleb and Bo later on, but that's mainly due to the connection of the story. It has nothing to do with, like, them as people, because, like, when they all meet in the tavern, they are kind of cordially silly and friendly, but like they don't trust each other. No one trusts each other other than like Caleb and Nott, because they're already established friends, and Jester and Ford are also kind of established friends, I say with air quotes, but like nobody really trusts any of like the party does not trust each other. It's full of distrust, which makes it more fun when they actually do come together and like have a serious bond. And as we will move on to the next episodes, you'll see like the bonds of friendship are really held together with sticky tape, because good God. Anyway though, on to episode 2. The episode now starts with us meeting Ford, training with his captain, who says that he's scared and that's why his attacks fail, and that brave men know how to wait. They train a bit more and Ford almost gets him, but the captain pulls a pretty unique swordplay and tells Ford to never underestimate your enemy. Ford is upset he can't seem to land a hit, but his captain reassures him that he's still learning and would make a great captain one day. They go back and forth a bit about Ford not believing he's leader material, yet I just kind of zoned out because of the amount of telling that's happening about Ford's character. Like, they're constantly telling us everyone says he's a coward and constantly scared, and like the captain is like, are you gonna let them like Are you gonna believe what they tell you? But a rock to the boat stops Ford from answering, assuming it's a storm, but the captain mentions someone has found him and locks his sword away. They run outside and do their best to prepare the ship, but it's clear a monster is in the water. Ford asks for help from a crew member, but they run off to the underbridge, and Ford follows and discovers they plan to blow the ship up. Before Ford can stop him, he's stabbed in the chest and left to die. And again, we're told 2 more times Ford is a coward. In what way? He went after your ass. Yeah, he didn't stop you, sure, but he didn't run away from the confrontation or what you were doing. Anyway, the crew member Sabian, who I cannot remember if is actually a part of the campaign and might come back later. I'm drawing a blank, but he jumps off the ship, and right as Ford is trying to say something, the ship explodes. The intro then plays and we see Ford has washed up ashore and his wound is healed. And for some reason, he doesn't even question it, but he sees he's the only one who survived the wreck and ends up finding his captain's sword in the sand and promises to be the man the captain thought he could be and walks off with the sword on his back. And we see it pulse to life and alert something in the water. We then bounce back to Bo, who is training with Dyron and learning how to pressure point strike. Bo makes a joke that Volstruckers can't be invincible, but Dyron stays quiet, making her lock in on the training a little bit more, and is then told she has a mission and that she need not worry about anyone figuring out what's going on as she was benched in the original library she's at, but that Dyron put in transfer papers for her to go to a more remote library, and says her mission is to get a name from her contact for the blast site Bo investigated, as it was too big a job to not come from the top. Bo's a bit paranoid on why someone would sell such dangerous info, but Dyron deflects and says her being paranoid will make her last longer, and that they don't really need to know, and that she's to go to a carnival and meet him, and that she needs to leave now and trust no one. I love Dyron. Anyway, but now we're off to meet the 5th and 6th member of the party, Jester and the Traveler. Hands down the best characters of the whole party, mainly just due to her silly, sweet, and kind of naughty personality. But we cut to a love dungeon that Jester's mother works and I think owns, as she is a famous singer, and man, what a song. But we see Jester is running around the club playing pranks and helping out, which I'm 50-50 on, as Jester's mother in the original had her in hiding, as her having a child would hurt her profile as a lady of the night, which is how Jester in a sense made her first real friend, the Traveler, who is invisible. This will be important later, though I really wish they'd held off on mentioning him so soon, but I get it. Anyway, after the song, Jester and her mother talk about the show and how she can't wait to paint a new backdrop for her and do a few more things, but unfortunately her mother and the whole club will be busy after Lord Sharp's speech, as he's booked the whole club. Jester is disappointed and disgusted, but gets that they can't cancel on him because he throws anyone in jail who says no to him, which I really love this whole scene because one, we have Jester actively discussing how excited she is to paint and try out her ideas with her mom, which is big in the OG, because even though Jester's mother is really busy, she still loves her and tries her best to be with her. And we do see that in the show, as she would cancel with anyone else for her, and the whole discussion about her painting is also part of the OGs. Since Jester had to be hidden, her mother encouraged her to bring the world to her in her room, so full Rapunzel paints in her room since she couldn't leave. So this whole interaction is a nice way to include those parts of Jester's original backstory without overdoing it, though this new reason for Jester having to leave the club and city is it's okay. I mean, it kind of takes away from the fact Jester's mom had actually been helping the guild uncover Lord Sharp's involvement with the revelry after Jester had stolen something from them, but instead we get Jester thinking of ways to trick Sharp into missing his appointment. But before we see that plan in action, we cut back to Bo at an inn and Caleb and Nott arriving at the same inn, but break into the horse stables to sleep in, as they spent most of their money on whiskey for Nott. Nott does mention that the necklace Caleb wears could get them enough money for what they need and more. He quickly hides it and she asks if it's magic, and we get quick callbacks to monsters from the original campaign of werewolves and zombies, which technically will turn up again. But Caleb says no, and Nott asks if his mother gave it to him, causing Caleb to sadden and just says he needs it to survive. Nott then lets it go and asks if she can steal stuff for the night. Caleb says no, as it's a little risky, but as he falls asleep, Nott sneaks off. And my god, did I completely forget that we just cut to a completely new character, Essek, which again, I get we're doing the Beacon stolen plotline completely and slightly differently, and he is heavily involved, but could they like have waited till episode 3 to introduce him? But anyway, we see him meet with the queen, and she states the beacon being taken is a devastating loss. Her general states that if the people find out, there could be riots, and she says she will release the full force of her army before it happens. Essex gets worried and says that without the beacon, the soldiers who die's souls will be lost and they will have no way to be reborn. But the queen says that all of them are at risk of that if the beacon isn't returned, and that she is also worried for the beacon as it's primordial and that there's a reason they keep it protected. Though the queen makes a weird comment about Essex not appreciating better what's been lost, which like, in what way is he not getting that this thing's important? But it's just a weird comment for her to make. But she tells the general he has 2 days to get everything ready to march on the empire, and that Essek better find the beacon, which I'm so confused on what his role is here in the kingdom. It is kind of revealed when Essek and the general speak about the queen and her taking Dunamancers, I'm probably saying that wrong, in for questioning, as they're the only ones who can show someone how to use the beacon. So that is what Essex is. However, though, I am really like confused on his specific role. But Essex and the general come to a stop, and the general admits he thought he'd have time in his next life to experience fatherhood, but that now could be gone. Essex assures him that he still will, and the general asks about Essex's mother and gives him a gift to give her, which is a piece of brimstone. And then we finally cut back to Ford arriving to Nicodranus, the city Jester lives in, but is unable to get in without papers. However, he gets so upset the sword on his back activates and magically makes the guard let him in. And then we cut back to Bo, and I'm like, okay, I get the story needs to move along, but this really should have just been a solid Jester, Essex, and Ford episode, since Bo and Caleb and Nott had full episodes dedicated to their introductions. Like, I don't feel like they need to be involved in the second episode right now. Ugh. Anyway, Bo is remembering her fight with Trent's second and seeing how she could improve the fight, and realizes the shard she found is also what is on Trent's second's arm, which I find so funny because she already knew the Volstruckers were involved in some way. She's even going to get a name for a Volstrucker and knows that they use magic and the shard amplifies magic. So I don't think this is a big OMG moment like she thinks it is, because it just doesn't make sense. But that doesn't matter because we cut back to Caleb and Nott getting caught as she's stolen a bit more than she should have, and in the scuffle to get away, an NPC drops their lamp and sets the barn on fire, kinda, and Caleb and Nott, having no choice, release the horses to get away, Bo's included, and run off into the forest. And now we are back to Essek. See what I mean about the jumping around? It's too much. Anyway, Essek returns home and gives the stone, lying and saying it's from him. We see Essek's mother isn't well, and that Essek is hiding her and trying to find a cure, as she has typhros, a type of, we'll say, magical dementia that happens when you're reborn one too many times. Essex and his mother have a bit of a conversation, and she states that she won't be completely gone due to the Lord of Light, and Essex angrily says the Lord of Light is a rock and needs to be studied, not worshipped, and gets smacked for it, and kind of calms down and admits he's just not ready to lose her. And as she tries to comfort him, she has a memory spell and lashes out and can't seem to remember what life she's in. Essex then has her sit down, and we go back to Ford looking around the city, accidentally activating his powers of copying other people's faces, but he doesn't dwell on it too much and ends up at Lord Sharp's speech, where he says the Empire has asked for their help in the war and that they should get involved, but Jester interrupts with her prank of paintings of Lord Sharp in not so flattering ways. Jester ends up getting caught, and Sharp's men chase after her, and after like the quickest chase scene ever, she runs into Ford, who she finds very handsome. Anyway, Jester asks for his help, and he tries to explain his way out of everything, but his sword manifests in his hand, and he ends up blasting the guys by accident. And they run away, getting chased by Lord Sharp's men, and Ford keeps accidentally using his new powers, which are all water-based, by the way, and like really cool. I love water-based powers. Anyway, Jester asks for the traveler's opinion on how to get away, but gets no response, and they run out of the window and back to the club. Jester shows Ford her room, and we see Jester's paintings of the traveler and says he's her best friend and God. Jester then asks a bunch of questions about Ford since he's not from around here, and then remembers they haven't even introduced each other yet, saying she's Jester, and asks what his name is and bet it's heroic like him. And this is where the Texan voice change kicks in for Ford. This is also part of the OG campaign. This does happen. Saying his name is Ford Stone. Jester mentions the voice change, but notices he's hurt and uses a spell the traveler taught her to heal him. And she kind of finds out from Ford that he was on a ship, and she just assumes he was a captain and asks a bunch of not exactly dirty questions, but just kind of sound dirty. Unfortunately, Lord Sharp has made it to the chateau, and Jester's mother tells her she needs to escape to Zadash, where an old friend of hers owns a hotel she can stay with. She then asks Ford to take Jester to Zadash to keep her safe. Jester and her mother hug, and Ford and Jester leave the city. We then cut back to Nott and Caleb walking to a river, and we see Nott is scared of water, so Caleb carries her across. She apologizes for stealing so much. He says it's fine, but to maybe steal less things than all at once to draw less attention. She calls him smart and is glad he's not mad at her and shows him the wanted poster. And he's shocked she didn't turn him in, and she says she may be a goblin, but she's no rat. They have a nice moment complimenting each other, and she asks what they're going to steal at the carnival. Caleb says it's just one thing he needs for a specific spell, and that he needs Lunamar, some kind of glowing beetle that is on the flyer of the carnival. And after giving her an enchanted branch that allows them to speak to each other from short distances, we cut back to Ford and Jester walking. Ford asks Jester to drop the captain part when she says his name and says like semantics and shit. She says, oh, like a vacation, and pulls out a book of fun sites to visit in Zadash and mentions a magic school. Ford takes interest, but Jester dismisses his interest as he's already powerful like her and the traveler. Ford then asks if that's who gave her her powers. She says yes, and asks if he wants to meet him, but for some reason he does not answer her. This will come back later. Anyway, she asks who gave him his powers, and he says he doesn't know, and we cut back to Bo being followed by Trent's second in command, but then we jump back to Essex aiding his mother, and it's revealed he is the one who helped steal the beacon and is the one who plans to help Trent study it. We learn the beacon operates outside of actual magic and is part of the universe, mainly time, gravity, and reality, and even shows multiple outcomes to come, or could. Trent says that his little spiel may work on others, but that all he sees is a mechanism, and that to master one you have to break it apart and study every bit of it. Essex agrees and says they'll work nicely together, and the episode ends. Final thoughts, even though I kind of word vomited all my final thoughts during the episode reviews. Anyway, though, I was just feeling crazy and needed to vent. I'll probably review the rest of the season for my own sanity and probably get yelled at fans for misremembering some stuff in the process. But as a D&D girly, I just wanted to share my thoughts. Again, I don't really hate what's happening. I'm not completely disappointed with what we got. I understand the limitations with Amazon. That's just gonna happen. I mean, look at Has Been Hotel. But that's more like Spindlehorse's fault, not Critical Role's. But like, again, stuff like Homestuck or stuff like Critical Role, which is incredibly long pieces of media and like specific types of media for that matter, to be adapted into shows is a hard thing to do. I will admit it is a very hard thing to do, especially when you have to cut things down and format it in a way that is more viewer friendly. But D&D based things or fantasy based shows need to be longer. I mean, look at Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is super freaking long, and even the Hobbit movies understand that the franchise and the stories need to be longer. They need to be stretched out so you can get a good feel of the world, the characters, get everybody situated, and like, it needs to be longer. It genuinely needs to be longer. The episodes need to be a solid hour, and they need to be given 10 episodes a season, specifically for the Mighty Nein. Vox Machina is perfectly fine with the 8 episode count and the time frame that they're worked around in. Perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. I have no issues. But for some reason, the Mighty Nein just really needs to be longer. Also the OC redesign series is coming. I haven't forgotten. It might be all has-been based characters because I feel more comfortable with it being my first like video for OCs. But trust I won't stick to just has-been OCs. Also, I know it's a long shot, but if we make it to 100K for my birthday, this March 13th, which is a Friday, would be an absolutely insane birthday gift. Anyway, next video will be the Baxter and St. Peter redesign video because yay, when that is done, I can do the full Has-Been Hotel rewrite video plus all the season 2 redesigns of the characters. So I'm looking forward to that. Anyway, love y'all. Bye.